Labor Day may signal the unofficial end of summer, but that doesn't mean it's time to end your vegetable garden. In the Deep South, we still have plenty of warm days ahead of us. And now is the best time to dig in and revamp and revive your garden for the fall. In this edition of Blooming on the Bayou, TWILA's Kristen White enlists the help of an expert from the LSU AgCenter to help you transition your vegetable garden from summer to fall to gain a bountiful harvest for weeks to come.
Hey guys, welcome back to Blooming on the Bayou, and today we're here at the LSU AgCenter Botanic Gardens at Burden, and this place is a gardener's dream. There's lots of beautiful and exotic plants that you can feast your eyes upon, but the best thing about this place are the wealth of horticulture experts that can help you answer any questions that you might have about your garden, and we're going to go find one to talk about our subject today. We're in luck. We've already found an expert to help us with our horticulture questions. This is Lee Rouse, the East Baton Rouge Parish horticulture agent. And Lee, this time of year, you know that vegetable gardeners, it's a really tough transition time because you've got some plants that are still thriving, but you've also got some plants that look kind of raggedy. So what are some things that you need to just go ahead and give up and some that can thrive until October?
Certainly, yeah. So it's a difficult time because we have hot weather and cold weather kind of rubbing elbows. So stuff like okra, it's on its last leg. You can get a few more pods off of it, but really, if you're ready to get some new plants in the garden, these need to come out. If you're growing cucumbers from spring, get that out the garden. Hot peppers, I would get your last harvest off of those as quickly as possible. They're starting to get stink bugs, they're starting to get leaf-footed bugs. Spring tomatoes, you want to get those out of the garden. Many times you'll have them in the garden. You'll have determinants or indeterminates. Determinants being the plants that grow to a certain height, and then indeterminates, they'll continue to keep growing. Many times the determinate plants will peter out late spring into summer, but the indeterminates will keep growing and they'll have the appearance that maybe they're still doing well because they do have some tomatoes on them. But really, get those out of the garden, get the insects out, rotate your crops, and put something new in that place.
You said that eggplants need to be pulled up because I just planted some eggplants at the end of July, and so you're telling me I need to pull them up?
If you planted your eggplants back in spring, absolutely. They've been there for a long time. They're starting to gather some insects and start eating it. You can see right here we have a hornworm caterpillar that's starting to eat
no!
this. And if anybody's ever grown tomatoes or anything in the Solanaceae family, this caterpillar is going to devour this in a heartbeat. Okay. So again, another good reason to just start fresh is to get all of this material out of there, get rid of that food source for the insects, and then start with some new, fresh plants. You can still get away with planting some cucumbers. You'll get some further into, say, October, November. You can harvest off of that. You can also plant some of your tomatoes, your fall tomatoes. And we have an excellent resource at the LSUAgCenter.com, the Louisiana Vegetable Planting Guide, that has tons of different varieties to choose from.
Now, something you mentioned earlier that you can plant right now, beans. And I've never had a whole lot of luck with beans. I think it's because when I plant them, they're always kind of an afterthought, and I put them in an area of the garden that doesn't either get a lot of sun throughout the whole day, or I don't have a lot of space, so I usually plant bush beans. But you said this is a great additive to anybody's fall vegetable garden.
Certainly. So moving into September, you can plant lima beans or you can plant snap beans. Typically we direct seed these, which means we just put them straight into the garden. You can also buy transplants if needed, but once they come up, you're going to get a plethora of beans off of either one of them, whether it's snap beans or green beans or lima beans. The other thing that are great about beans is that a bush bean, which is this variety here, is going to produce a lot more beans than a pole bean would. But if you're limited on space, you can grow the pole beans on a trellis vertically and actually get more beans per square foot than you would on a bush bean.
So we talked about beans. Another question that I've been dying to ask you, with squash and zucchini, you said that you can put it in the ground right now. I love to plant these every spring, but it never fails. In June, towards the end of June, they look great. It seems like every year before I go to the Farm Bureau convention, I come back and squash vine borers have devoured the entire plant, and I know that once that happens, you're done and you need to pull them up. Is that something you still have to worry about if you put new plants in the ground right now?
Absolutely. Squash vine borer is absolutely a terrible insect that can, as you know, kill an entire crop of squash. So the best thing to know how to get rid of it is to understand the life cycle of that insect. and properly identify the adult moth that it comes from. So it's going to be a black and red moth that's going to fly around. She's going to lay her eggs inside the vine of that squash, and those grubs are going to eat out the inside, and it's going to cause a lot of damage to the rest of that plant. So one of the best ways to get rid of that is to take care of the adult if you see the adult.
Right.
So it's going to be the base of the vine that you really want to exclude that moth from. They're typically not going to lay too far up the vine as it grows. They want to get inside that part right next to the ground. Another great alternative is to wrap the base of the squash vine in foil as it's coming up, and that'll prevent that insect from laying her eggs inside of the vine.
See, that's a very good fact to know and something I'll have to remember next year when planting my squash. Well, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, Lee's going to show us some tips and tricks to planting your fall tomato garden and how to make it thrive so you can have tomatoes well into October. Stay with us. Okay, we're back and we're going to talk about my favorite topic, and that's tomatoes in the garden. But I've never been very successful planting fall tomatoes, but I think you're going to give me some tips and tell me the difference between, there is a difference between spring and fall tomatoes.
Yeah, so one of the biggest differences with spring and fall tomatoes is some of the morphological factors of the flower. And so some of our spring tomatoes aren't going to be able to set too well right here in the fall months. And then the fall tomatoes aren't going to set too well in the spring months. And part of that is due to the climatic issues. So you're planting spring tomatoes when it's cooler and the temperatures are increasing throughout the growing season. Well, we're planting these in the hot of summer or fall here in South Louisiana. And then hopefully eventually the temperatures will start to decline. So that's the differences in the temperatures, and why some set in spring and why some set in fall is because some are increasing in temperature through the growing season and some are decreasing in temperature through their growing season.
So tell me about some of those varieties that you can go in the store right now and pick up that would be great to plant in the fall.
So a few that I've seen in a couple nurseries around town have been Phoenix, Florida 91s, Heat Master, Solar Set, Solar Flare. Again, anything with that hot title to it, something that's saying that it is hot right now and it's going to be able to do well in this temperature.
Okay. Are there different things that you need to keep in mind when you're putting your fall tomatoes in the ground, or you want to do the same things that you do in the spring?
Certainly, one of the things that you would definitely do is pull a soil test before planting. So you probably had one in the springtime. You grew your tomatoes, they pulled up a lot of the nutrients that you put out, you pulled the tomatoes off, maybe you've composted your tomatoes. So you've reduced the amount of nutrients that are in the soil by something, we don't know what that is. So I would certainly have a soil test pulled, and that will indicate what it is that you need to add to that garden before planting, whether it's nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, or any other essential nutrient that plant needs. You'll know that before planting rather than planting and then finding out that something went wrong and then having to try to remediate that in the middle of the growing season. So when you pull a soil test, if you're growing in a true soil such as this soil here, earth, native soil, something like that, you only need one of the baggies that's in the soil testing kit to submit to the soil lab, and they'll be able to run everything. If you're growing in a raised bed, something that has a soilless media, something that's a bagged material, or if it's a composted pine bark type material, you're going to need to submit a quart. There's 3 bags that come in the soil sample kit. Fill up all of those bags for 1 sample. The soilless media test is going to have a different sampling method than the true soil test. And so they do need to know which one you're actually sampling. That way they can do it correctly and let you know exactly what you need in your particular growing area.
Okay. Tell me, if people want to do a soil test, how can they submit it and where do they need to go?
So you can go to any of your local extension offices, pick up a soil testing kit. You can also go to the LSU AgCenter's website and find the form, and you can submit your own sample. Many of our local nurseries will also carry the soil testing kits. If you find the mail-in boxes at the local nurseries, those are going to be free to take home, and then you submit a check for $6 for shipping of the sample and then $10 for every sample that you send in.
Well, Lee, thank you so much for joining us. I've gotten a lot of good tips from you, and I hope everybody at home has. I know that I'm going to take them and bring them into my home garden, and maybe I can have a successful fall garden this year. If you have any questions or ideas for future segments, submit them to us on our new website, twilatv.org. We've got a brand new design, and we have a spot on there where you can submit questions for Blooming on the Bayou, and Lee will surely be able to answer any questions that you have. Next month, Lee's going to be joining us again, and we're going to talk about incorporating ornamental grasses into your landscape. So we hope to see you next time on Blooming on the Bayou.
As Kristen said, be sure to head over to our website at twilatv.org for plenty of resources from the LSU AgCenter to help you grow a successful fall garden. Well, that does it for this edition of TWILA. Be sure to join us next week when Carl and I will travel to New Orleans to the Farm and Table Conference and Famboree at the New Orleans Ernest N. Morial Convention Center. This event is a two-day event featuring all the best local chefs at the Battle of the Gulf Culinary Clash. Then foodies, farmers, and families will all come together for a day of gardening, animals, greenhouses, cooking, and more ways to learn how to bring farming into your own backyard and to your table. We'll bring you some great stories from there next week. Until then, you can watch all of our stories online at twilatv.org and be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. For all of us here at TWILA, thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again right here next week.